Tragedy and Bullets. Chicago. Welcome to the world of mayhem in Chicago's haunted and turbulent history. Massacres, Fort Dearborn, called the Windy City because of all the hot air blown around by the politicians and the crooks. Welcome to Chicago. Hauntings and mayhem. Chicago is known worldwide for a colorful gangster past starting during the 1920s and 30s, with murder and mayhem down every alleyway, speakeasies, and mysterious sidewalks. Chicago has proven to exhibit a dark past, from catastrophic events like the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 and the Eastland disaster to murderous mob wars, notorious Colombian expedition, and the serial killer named H.H. Holmes. Al Capone, who frequented the Congress Plaza Hotel during his heyday as a Chicago mobster, has been seen haunting it still. But old Scarface had his own ghost.
The St. Valentine's Day Massacre marked the end of any significant gang opposition to Capone, but it was also the act that finally began the decline of Capone's criminal empire. He had just gone too far, and the authorities, and even Capone's adoring public, were ready to put an end to the bootleg wars. Perhaps the strangest bit of history in regards to the massacre involved the fact that Capone had not seen the last of one of the men killed on that fateful day. It was while he was incarcerated in Pennsylvania that Capone first began to be haunted by the ghost of James Clark, one of the massacre victims and the brother-in-law of George Moran. While in prison, other inmates reported that they could hear Capone screaming in his cell, begging Jimmy to go away and leave me alone. After Capone returned to Chicago, he took up residence at the Lexington Hotel, and while here, would report his most frequent encounters with the ghost. While living at the Lexington Hotel, there were many times when Capone's men would hear from strange begging for the specter to leave him in peace. On several occasions, bodyguards broke into his rooms, fearing that someone had gotten to their boss. Capone would then tell them of Clark's ghost. Whether the ghost was real or not, Capone certainly believed that he was. The crime boss even went so far as to contact a psychic named Alice Britt to get rid of Clark's angry spirit. Not long after a seance was conducted to try and rid Capone of the vengeful spirit, Jaime Cornish, Capone's personal valet, also believed that he saw the ghost. He entered the lounge of Capone's apartment and spotted a tall man standing near the window. He demanded to know the man's identity, but the shadowy figure slipped behind a curtain and out of sight.
Gun malls. A gun mall, or gangster mall, is a female companion of a male professional criminal. A famous cow. Ghostly hitchhikers. The Green Mill Cocktail Lounge. Al Capone's favorite speakeasy in the 1920s. Capone's associate, Jack Machine Gun McGurn, who owned part of the club, slashed and stabbed singer Joe E. Lewis in 1927 for considering an offer from a rival club. Joe Lewis had suffered a fractured skull, had over a dozen knife wounds in his head, and part of his tongue was cut off. His right arm was paralyzed, and his left wasn't much better. His mind was cloudy, and he had to be retaught how to speak. Frank Sinatra portrayed his friend Lewis in a film bio called The Joker is Wild in 1957. Available to see on YouTube if you so desire. Big Jim Colosimo with his second wife, the singer Dale Winter. On May 11, 1920, Big Jim Colosimo was shot to death in his own restaurant, allegedly by notorious New York hitman Frankie Yale, on orders from Johnny Torrio. Before Capone, there was Big Jim Colosimo. The father of the Chicago outfit met his fate at the end of a gun. Tony Lombardo, head of the Unione Siciliana and associate of Al Capone. He was fatally shot on September 7, 1928. An arrow points to the body of the slain gang chieftain on the sidewalk. The brazen daytime assassination in the Loop led the retaliatory killings that included the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in Chicago. John Herbert Dillinger, June 22, 1903 to July 22, 1934, was an American gangster during the Great Depression. He led the Dillinger Gang, which was accused of robbing 24 banks and 4 police stations. Perhaps the most famous bank robber in U.S. history from 1933 to July 1934. Anna Sage, nicknamed the Woman in Red, best known for having assisted the Federal Bureau of Investigation in tracking down gangster John Dillinger. Outside Chicago's Biograph Theater, notorious criminal John Dillinger, public enemy number 1, is killed in a hail of bullets fired by federal agents in front of the Biograph Theater. Well, that doesn't look very fair to me. The alley today. Legend has it that Dillinger's ghost still haunts this very alley. A shadowy figure has been seen either running along the sidewalk or in the alley itself, and suddenly disappears upon falling to the ground. Dillinger or not, the ghost of a man running and disappearing into the alley has been reported by countless witnesses over the years. Charles Dean O'Banion was an American mobster in Chicago during the bootlegging wars of the 1920s. He was the main rival of Johnny Torrio and Al Capone. As a cover for criminal activities, he bought into Schofield's Flower Shop at 738 North State Street. Mob etiquette demanded that gangsters spend thousands of dollars on funeral arrangements. And thanks to O'Banion's connections, Schofield's quickly became the premier flower shop of organized criminals. The mobster florist. On the morning of November 10th, 1924, O'Banion was arranging chrysanthemums in the back room. His bodyguard, Louis Altieri, had claimed he was sick with a hangover and did not come to the flower shop that day. Frankie Yale entered the shop with John Scalisi and Albert and Selmy. "Hello, boys," greeted O'Banion. "You from Mike Merlot's?" and stuck out his hand in greeting. Shots rang out, and O'Banion fell to the ground, mortally wounded. The building is gone and is now a parking lot. Charles Dean O'Banion, July 8, 1892, November 10, 1924. Florist to the mob. Camp Douglas. "80 acres of hell." Many have heard of Andersonville and alleged allegations of mistreatment of Union POWs, but none come worse than that of Camp Douglas, a prisoner of war camp in Chicago, Illinois. Over 1,800 Confederate soldiers passed through the prison camp, which eventually came to be known as the North's Andersonville for its inhumanity. Confederate Mound at Oak Woods. To die in Chicago. Confederate prisoners at Camp Douglas. Today, condominiums fill most of the site where Camp Douglas stood. Often a soldier's ghost is seen peeking out of the condo windows. Eternal Silence, a monument at Graceland Cemetery. It is said to show those who look into its eyes a vision of their death. Now that's more than a little scary. The Ghost of the Eastland Disaster. On July 24, 1915, the SS Eastland was parked along the Chicago River downtown.
Obviously, one of the great tragedies in Chicago's history, the largest loss of life at a single incident in the history of the city.
The Eastland was a boat. It was about the size of a mini cruise ship. It was docked in front of the Reed Murdoch building on July 24th, 1915. After the boat capsized, there was 2,500 people that went into the water, and 844 people lost their lives, including 17 entire families.
Nobody famous was on that boat. Nobody famous died, unlike the Titanic. It was working class people, immigrants from the Western Electric Company on Cicero and Berwyn.
They brought the bodies to the 2nd Regiment Armory, and that building later on would become famous because it was turned into Harpo Studios in the 1980s. For the site, people have reported of hearing screams and cries of terror coming from the river, right where the Eastland was docked, faces being seen in the water. There's also reports of people seeing people drowning in the river. Harpo Studios, where Harpo Studios was, they tore it down last year. There's reports of seeing ghosts and apparitions inside Harpo Studios. The most popular one was the Gray Lady, who they believe was one of the victims at the Eastland tragedy.
What I think should really haunt Chicagoans about that disaster was how long it was ignored and covered up. For almost a century, most of official Chicago ignored that event. It didn't reshape any policy. Unlike the Iroquois Theater Fire, which helped create safety standards in public buildings where you have panic bars, other tragedies in the city have literally reshaped the world and how we relate to one another in space.